featured speaker is here tomorrow morning, so you can come directly here. All right. I'd like to introduce Hugo Perez. He's our presenting the secret sauce, telling brand stories that come to life. As a seasoned digital marketer, Hugo develops brand stories that hit their mark on any channel to any audience. His personal story weaves across the agencies and firms of all types, fueled by wide-ranging global experiences. He specializes in thought leadership, creative ideation, brand innovation, and 360 communication strategies. He has led content strategies for a wide range of clients, including Starbucks, Taco Bell, Turtle Wax, Cricket Wireless, Scott's Miracle-Gro, Allstate, MTV, Mars Inc., Frito-Lay, and AT&T. So please welcome Hugo.
Good afternoon. I know I'm your last speaker of the day, but lucky for you, I'm talking about the thing that I'm most passionate about, so I hope that my excitement will give you a little energy at the end of the day here too. One thing that wasn't mentioned in my intro as well is that I've been an adjunct here for many, many years, and it's been a great honor and a pleasure to be a part of the team here. I see Chuck, who brought me onto the campus and introduced me here, so very excited to be here with you guys. So I'm here to talk to you about the secret sauce of how you tell a great story. And I know you've been hearing all sorts of stuff about storytelling so far, so I'm going to try to give you something a little bit different. But first, I want to tell you a little bit more about my personal story in terms of what makes me me. And this is what I want you all to think about as you think about what makes you you. All of us have unique things about us that when we draw them together, we put them all together, they create what we call a common thread. And we'll talk about a common thread in more detail in a moment. But when you start identifying that common thread, you start realizing that it all makes sense. All the things that you want to do, all the things that you communicate, all the ways that you express yourself all tie in together. And here's the big idea for today. If all you want to do is write this down and then fall asleep for the rest of the day, that's fine. Once you identify your common thread, you are your most authentic self as a brand, an organization, an individual, whatever you are, and it'll make your storytelling matter. So you've got to understand what your common thread is. As you look at these images, these are all images from my life. My common thread is built around connections with people. And so I've done this in a variety of ways. I'm a home chef. I love to have dinner parties and cook for my friends. I love trying all sorts of wine. About 15 years ago, I decided I wanted to become a wino. So I went to Italy and I started learning how to drink wine. And so now I'm proud to say I'm a wino, and invite me for a glass of wine. We'll have a great time. But then about 3 or 4 years ago, I was struck with a dilemma. I had a client who was a beer client, Anheuser-Busch, and I didn't really like beer. So I was challenged. Well, they did something really cool. They invited us to beer school. And so over 24 hours or 48 hours, I tasted something in the range of 18 different beers. And there was a lot of beer drinking. We started at like 9 a.m. and went all the way through 6 p.m. for 2 days in a row. And guess what happened? I started to like beer. I love beer. So I'm a beer drinker and I'm a coffee holic. Oh my gosh. My mom started putting a little bit of coffee in my baby bottle because she's a coffee lover and she wanted one of her kids to love coffee as well. So the good news is I love coffee. The bad news is it does nothing for me in terms of giving me energy or keeping me awake because there's so much in my system. I'm completely immune. So I love it and I drink it as often as I can. I love to travel. I've had the good fortune of having a career that has let me travel the world and see all sorts of stuff, and I love the mixture of history and new stuff and art and music and all sorts of stuff. It feeds my soul. I'm a little bit of a fashion addict, so I own about 75 pairs of unique gym shoes or tennis shoes that I try to rotate through. I'm moving in a couple of weeks, and my biggest worry is who's packing my shoes up the right way so that they work out for me. I told you travel. I'm also really into movies and comic book movies particularly. I'm so into it that about 7 or 8 years ago, I gathered a bunch of my friends and I said, we need to start our own film company because I want to make movies. And so we did. And so those 3 on the bottom are our first 3 films that we did. They're short films, full feature-length scripts, but we wanted to get into the business. We wanted to do the stuff that we love to do. So I try to live a carpe diem life, seize the day. I don't want any moment to pass. My common thread, what makes me me, is those connections with people, those moments in life. Mario Lopez, because I'm a marketer too, and so one time we hired him and he did this great stuff, and we're the same age, and so I was like, wow, how exciting. So I didn't look that bad. So it was pretty good. So a session on storytelling always should start with storytelling. So I need all of your help right now. We're going to tell 3 stories really quick. Anyone out there, look at this picture. Tell me a story about how a galoshes company would use this image to tell a story. What would you say? Yes, sir.
It's like dollar slices in New York City. It's snowing outside. I was actually in a situation just like this.
This is called Tuesday in Chicago, like almost every week.
Yeah. So we had dollars. So basically, you couldn't go anywhere because the snow was too much in the city. So there were dollar slices across the street, and it's so cheap, and so you get like 2 big pies, and so you bring it in, and so.
Awesome. How do I tie that into my galoshes? If I'm a galoshes company, and this is the image that my marketing director says, hey, I took this picture on the way in, let's use this in our advertising campaign this week. What's the story that I'm telling?
Dollar slice and your socks stay nice.
Oh, look at that, even with a little rhyming, I like it. So we heard the pizza, we heard it from a galoshes company. What about if you're the best weather team in West Virginia? How do you use this picture to tell a story? Yes?
We got this one right.
Ooh, that's about right. Unless it was just happening right now, then they're like, whoops, we didn't prepare you. It happens. In Chicago, it feels like, I live in Chicago, and I feel like we haven't had spring yet because winter still keeps hanging on. It was about 40 degrees on Wednesday, so it's just really hard. So weather is a big story. So storytelling matters. We're working at a lot of different ways. When you look at an image, when you have an experience, you draw from the different moments that are authentic and unique to whatever the angle is that you're trying to tell a story, whomever you're telling it for, to make it matter. That's why this picture can work from whoever is using the picture, because it doesn't matter about the picture. It matters who you're telling the story to and what you're going to focus it on. Bring it back to that comment there, and we'll keep bringing that too. The good news about our life today is that humans need stories. From the dawn of man, from the caveman drawings to today, humans need stories. There's a great book out there, it's called The Storytelling Animal, that talks about the history of how humans, from our inception and our DNA coding and the way we're genetically built, we're storytellers, which is a great thing. We need to tell them, we need to hear them. Here's the best part about storytelling. It works across every race, gender, age, demographic, geography. Doesn't matter where you're at, a story will work, because it's all about focusing on who it is that you're telling that story to. I can tell the same story to 10 different audiences with just a picture. It just depends how I position that picture and what I'm trying to make that happen. I can tell the same story with a video that has music to it. It just depends on what you're doing. I might use bossa nova or samba or something if I'm in South America to hit the Brazilian audience. I might use salsa or merengue if I'm in the Caribbean. I might use, country music or something if I'm here in the US. Same image, different expressions depending on who you're doing it. Stories matter, stories tell. We all have a need to tell them. Here's the crazy part about stories and content and the way we consume it. Some research was recently done by LinkedIn that showed that about 4.6 billion pieces of content are created every day. I see that as 4.6 billion stories that are being told every day. Because a story doesn't have to be a 2-hour movie that you go and sit in. A story doesn't have to be a book that's 500 or 600 pages long. A story is anything that's conveying a message out to you that you're going to interact with. So with all this stuff out there, how do we break through? How do we matter? How do we make sure that people are paying attention? The challenge that we have is attention spans are shrinking. They keep shrinking because our technology is making us so adept at all this stuff that's happening that we're always in this midst of what's next, what's coming up. I find myself often nowadays, even when I don't need to, just pulling out my phone and scrolling through something, even though I've probably scrolled through it a million times, I'm just so used to it. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm even getting like the phantom itches. I keep my phone in my front pocket here, and I put it over there on purpose so it wouldn't itch. But already I'm like, is someone texting me? I kind of feel it. And so we're addicted. We get this desire, what's going on. And so we're combating all this stuff all the time. There's so many stories. So I've mentioned it a couple times. What's the key to breaking through all this? The common thread. The common thread is basically, it's what the unique identifier of who you are, what makes you you. And I'm saying that in a very personalized way because brands have a common thread. Brands are personal. One of the things that we're learning more and more as we spend time engaging with consumers is that they want to see brands be more like humans to them, like relationship. So they want them to feel really personal. It's not a one-way billboard world anymore. It's like, make me feel like you walk in my steps, like you know my life, like you are experiencing what I experience. So everyone has a common thread. And so we determine the common thread very simply by just asking 4 questions. Who are you? We ask, what are you trying to accomplish? Who are you doing it for? And why does it matter? Often when I sit with groups to do this, I've done this with one-on-one, and I've done this in 3 weeks. I'm doing it with a group of 45 educators around this school in Chicago. We're sitting down, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk through these 4 questions and then try to narrow it down and come to kind of like a mantra statement to determine, once we've synthesized all that stuff, what does it really mean? What do we stand for? And I'm going to give you some examples of some brands that have really captured this. But that moment, that synthesizing is really the hard part, because I think instinctively we all think we know what we stand for. I think if you work for a brand or an organization, I think you know what that organization or brand stands for. But I would challenge you that more often than not, there's probably lots of variations going on within the group of people that are leading that are unspoken. A couple of years ago, I was working with Cricket Wireless, and this was right before they were sold to AT&T. When I started working with that brand, there was 10 national cell phone carriers at that time. Cricket was number 10. The number one thing that was a problem with Cricket is people thought they were this cheap, gang banger kind of throwaway phone company. So on all the digital channels and every forum, everywhere, all you kept hearing about was how crappy it was and cheap and whatever. They weren't really talking about the service. They were talking about the idea of what that service looked like. So we sat down with the executives in the company. We asked them, give us your stakeholders. We want anyone that's important in this company that has a voice in shaping the decision of what we're doing. We ended up gathering about 20 people around a table. Within an hour, we knew that we were in big trouble, because the first question I asked is, what does this company stand for? And I got 20 different answers. So it was really, really hard for that company to do anything because they didn't know who they were themselves. As we fought through this and worked through this and asked questions, we started to realize that there were some things that were just personal desires, personal aspirations that people had. And when we got down to it, we realized we were a company that was more, it wasn't cheap, it was affordable, was the word that we got to. It was an affordable telecommunications provider for everyday people. All of a sudden, when we gathered that, that wasn't the expression that we used in the marketing, because who's going to say the affordable telecommunications service? But the idea internally was that once we clarified that, it gave us like a whole new breath in terms of how we communicated the story, and everything started getting reshaped to the point that we went from number 10 in rankings to number 3 within 18 months because we were so on our game understanding. And then the big stuff happened. AT&T came a knocking and bought them with one of the biggest acquisitions at that time. It was great. My personal pride moment in that was I was leading the digital and the creative team that was working on that, the digital social team. The CEO of Cricket had a town hall when he announced that AT&T had acquired them, and he said there was 3 reasons, but the third reason, he said, was the digital transformation that we made in the span of the 18 months. And then he looked at me over there. He never said my name, but I knew, and that was good. So it was exciting. Who are you? What are you trying to accomplish? Who are you doing it for? And why does it matter? You have to know these things. Here's a company that really understands this. Let's see if it'll go. just burn it. Scream it on the TV. Shut it up. Apple. Here's what I love about Apple and why I continually, I speak often on storytelling, and I try not to use Apple in my storytelling discussions, and I can't, because they just get it. You saw a commercial there that ran on television. It was a minute-long commercial. In the first 45 seconds, you didn't even see a product. But it's easy to get the feel, the understanding of what it is. And often when I ask people, what does Apple stand for? They're like, well, they're the phone company. But Apple would tell you they're the company that enables life to happen. They're the company that enables creativity. They're the company that enables you to connect. Man, that resonates with me because I tell you that's how I live my life too. So they get it, and so they don't have to do all the bells and whistles and show you their phone close up and get you the details. You're going to get that anyway. They're just showing you the feeling that they want you to have. Remember when I tell you that people want brands to feel like people and then connected? Most of the times when people see a commercial like that, they're like, yeah, I want those experiences. I want to feel that way. I want to be in that mindset. They get what it means to know your common thread and live that out all the time. You know, at the end of the day, when you put all this together, storytelling is like joke telling. You have to know the punchline so that you can set it up well. And today more than ever, that punchline has to make me care. I rotated through a bunch of different images of brands today that are working really hard to make us care. And they work to make us care in different ways. It's not always the cool, you know, wow, gee whiz moments like Apple. Sometimes it's funny. I love Flo. Flo is an icon. Her latest commercials are doing like an 80s theme where it's almost like Growing Pains, a sitcom from the 90s or the 80s, whenever that ran. And they show her there, and the voiceover talk, it has a little ditty, a little theme song. And then some guy walks by and says, hey, it's your new housekeeper. She goes, I'm not your housekeeper. I take care of your house. But it's really iconic, and it just stays in your mind. It had nothing to do with insurance, but everything to do with insurance, because they want you to be the company. They want to be the company that you rely on and trust with your house, with your life, with your experiences. They make me care. We have to make people care when they're hearing our stories as well. We need to speak to the heart in order to move the mind of our consumers that are out there today. Let's look at another commercial that makes me care. If you know the brand too, feel free to.
I want you to meet someone very special. This is your grandfather. He's my dad. Like I'm your dad. And you know, without him, we wouldn't be here. I really wish you could have met him.
That commercial about printers could be this emotional. Who knew that HP could make such a great commercial? Wow. Amazing. That was a Cannes award winner. It just got it right. It just understood. Yes.
That commercial would be more accurate if he had to stop and fix the printer.
True. You're hitting it on the side, you know, swearing at it. But that's aspirational. That's what they hope it works like. But again, it's making me care. It's making me understand that the moments are what matter. My tool might enable those moments to happen, but I want you to have moments. And that's great storytelling. You know, another way to look at this is to make a human connection. It's about being effective because you're working hard to know all the things that are about that person, the things that are going to tug at their heart. So It's about having those little moments of understanding cultural connections or understanding idioms or understanding, the pride that people would have in a sports team in their hometown. I know that there's a big baseball thing happening here. I'm not a baseball guy. I'm not a sports guy. I just called it a baseball thing. So, but I know there's great pride here. This is great. Sorry, Chuck, I know. I'm just not that guy. So, yes. I try to watch actually ESPN highlights whenever I go out to a client meeting. Most of my male clients will always gravitate to a sports something. So if you're going out for drinks, go watch some Sports Center for a little bit. You'll get a couple little nuggets, and then I know all about that, and talk about it. So just pivot the subject quickly when they get deep, because you get in trouble. Oh man, you get in trouble. So, but you want to make that human connection. You want people to care. So another one of my clients recently, this is the most random connection. I'm going to show you a piece in a second. They make blowtorches. Who cares? But they care. They're a family-owned company that's been around for over 100 years. And they were having a hard time connecting to their consumer. Because how do you make that matter? So here's what we did. We found stories of people that were using the blowtorches in ways that made their lives meaningful. And this is what we came up with.
I'm Dan Vilhaber, and I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. If I could pick anything in the world to do, it would be racing Indy 500. Having Burns-O-Matic torches in the garage lets you do a lot of things and inspires you to modify and improve your vehicle, like your race team in the garages at the Speedway. When I first get out there and the Indy cars are out practicing for the first day, opening day. Oh my gosh.
Gosh, again, their sales started to take off because all of a sudden people connected. That guy lives right outside the Indy 500 racetrack. He's been a lifelong fan, and he creates a blog that gives every detail about everything that happens in Indy 500 on his own because he's a fan. No one's paid him, no one's done anything, and we got him access to the track on the day that was closed, and we brought cars out. Oh my gosh, the joy that came out. Then he took us to his house, and when he opened his garage, he had all of our torches all lined up because he uses them to fix cars. That he likes to pretend that he's an Indy 500 car driver. Amazing story. So we found a bunch of these stories and we made it real human. That line when he goes, rah, rah, oh my gosh. We kept getting memes thrown back at us of people just enjoying that so much because that showed the true passion of who this guy was. Bring a human connection. That's how you make that common thread get pulled through. 4 emotional benefits that you should consider as you're telling these stories. We want to always make sure that we're having someone either get an emotional reward from our stories, having a problem solved, having a punchline delivered, or delivering some intrigue as we're telling the stories. Those are hooks. Those are ways to grab people in as you're telling them. But there should always be some emotional benefit because you want people to want to keep going with you. I told you that I'm a movie maker as well too, and in movies, I think Keith, you had where's Keith at? I saw you over there. You had an arc, the storytelling arc. All movies have this storytelling arc, and I loved your point about figure out your different point. They don't always start at the same point, but whenever you're telling a story, whatever point you're starting at, you need to hook them in order to keep them coming with you along for the ride. So one of these 4 key ways there's lots of other hooks. These are the 4 main ones. One of these 4 key hooks it's a great way of getting people engaged, interested, to follow along through with you so that the story that you're trying to tell, the emotion that you're trying to convey, the common thread that you're trying to pull through really gets them all the way across. And to determine the emotional benefit, the emotional trigger that you should use, just ask yourself, where is my brand, my company, myself, where am I now? And where do I need to go? So it seems very basic, but it's the idea of what's the challenge that I'm facing right now as a brand, and how do I best get out of that? When I was with Cricket Wireless, the challenge was getting people to not think that we were crappy. So what we started doing for them, we started using a lot of punchlines. We were making jokes about ourselves to get ourselves out of that mess. And then we switched it around and made it more emotional down the road or whatnot. But we figured out, where are we? where do we need to go? And that gave us the idea of where to start. You know, one of the funny aside on the cricket story, when we decided to use punchlines to tell our story, there was a question about how funny can we be? And I learned, man, as a marketer, you learn so many things. We spent 2 weeks in a study on humor, and we developed a whole bell curve on humor from really sardonic, very, you know, introspective kind of humor to laugh out loud guffaws. And we created this, this scale, and we went through all the leadership at Cricket and all these test groups and focus groups to see where on the scale of funny we were allowed to go. So somewhere in my files, I have this gigantic set of research on how to be funny and how to choose which scale of funny to be at. So I know how to be lots of funnies, so that's good. It's a good skill to use somewhere else. So emotional benefits for your storytelling. And then we want to take people on a journey. Once you know where you need to go, you build that journey into your storytelling. So you set up the context for the problem, you deliver the resolution or the moral to the story in whatever direction you want to go. You guys remember the Old Spice, man? Anytime you saw those commercials, it took you on a journey. It hooked you right away, because what the heck was this guy doing coming out of a shower talking to the camera? And then as it went along and the sets disappeared and other stuff, it just kept you going and going and going until the final payoff at the end, where he's just saying, you smell like a man. What? What? But it gave you a payoff and you felt like, wow, I want to be along on this journey. Another brand that I worked with was Coffee Mate, and they wanted to get into the mindset of getting people to understand that when you love coffee, like I love coffee, nothing gets in the way. And so we created a series of interstitial commercials, 15-second commercials, that helped us get the idea out of people's heads about what would you do for a good cup of coffee. We took them on a journey, and here's an example of what we did. So these are ideas that were picked up from people. We went on social and said, what would you do for coffee? And they suggested that they would create machines that would let them do it from bed. And so we brought their idea to life and showed it to them. And they loved that. Another guy said he would do this. His idea, it showed the passion, the love. It also showed both of those how lazy Americans are. But, you know, my job is to sell it. It's not to get you on that, you know, carpe diem life that I live. Maybe some other ways. But we want to take people on a journey. Couple last things. We want to find our focus in whatever we do. Each of the stories that I've shown you so far are very focused on one idea, one main theme that we try to do. And in print, they get this opportunity a lot to just get one clear visual or idea that they can just build on, and you keep growing. I want to bring your attention to this one on the highlighter most. This highlighter company did this series where they took all these iconic moments in history, and with the highlighter, they highlighted the woman that was ignored. And I found that so powerful because you didn't even really need to like think about it too much. Your eye automatically goes to the woman. So then you want to understand what's the little tagline, what's happening there. And they did this gigantic series, like 30 different pieces like this, where they kept highlighting. And it brought the idea of the highlighter bringing things, awareness or focus to something in such a simple way. I also love the way KFC, when they were introducing their hot and spicy chicken, that's chicken coming out of the car, not smoke, but it's so hot and spicy that it just gets you that room. Oh, that room again, see? It's emotional, it brings you back there. So find your focus. You don't have to tell every story with every single thing you do. You need to find that one idea, own that idea, that common thread, and pull it all the way through. Let that tell your story for you. And then we want to make sure we're marketing, in the world of marketing, we want to drive action. If your story is being put out there and no one's doing something with it, well, maybe we need to do a little bit more. Sometimes you tell stories because you just need to tell a story. But most of us that are engaged in any kind of marketing are telling a story because We want to raise awareness or raise funds or get someone to buy something or get someone to do something. So always keep in mind what's the action that you want. Awareness, engagement, emotion, recommendation, and then build your campaigns, build your storytelling so that there's a reason to act. And how do you do that? At the end of whatever it is, give people a command of some sort. Doesn't have to say, do this, but in the words that you do, you want them to feel that way. You want them to feel like I need to take a step somehow. I need to react somehow because of what I've engaged with. I'm Puerto Rican, and in my culture, we don't always say thank you out loud. We do a little head nod kind of a thing. When we're like, yeah, thank you, but we don't say the words. And I get in trouble all the time with my friends because they're like, how come you're so rude and you don't say thank you? I'm like, didn't you see me do my little head nod? I'm head nodding. And so I've trained them at this point now to understand the action that I want them to do. We also use, because we're always cooking and dancing and stuff, so our hands are full, so we point with our mouths. So often when I'm cooking at my house, I tell you I like to throw dinner parties, I'll be in the middle of stirring or cooking, I'm like, yeah, over there. And so again, I've trained them on an action that I want them to do. Same thing with your marketing. Drive the action. Get them to do stuff based on what's going on there. We want things to evolve, to drive motion and emotion and action and motivation, and not just stand there and be forgotten tomorrow. I mentioned earlier, we're not in the billboard generation anymore where we just put stuff up and let people look at it and walk away. Our world today is completely changed because of the digital transformation we have. We need to engage. We need to have dialogue. We need to interact. So build that into that. Social media makes it really easy. In your descriptions, you can write actions, you can put links, you can put keywords, hashtags, all sorts of stuff. So there's a variety of different ways, but just get them to do something as they look at your stuff.
While most of us think of only physical abuse when we consider domestic violence, financial abuse happens in 98% of all cases. By bringing financial abuse out of the shadows, Allstate Foundation Purple Purse is making the invisible visible. We can all hang a purple purse charm to show our support for a world without domestic violence and without financial abuse. Go to purplepurse.com for more information, to make a donation, and to get a charm.
So sometimes you get really lucky, and Scandal is at the top of its ratings, and you reach out to Kerry Washington, and it just reaches her heart because this is something that was personal to her, and we didn't know about it, and so it was like that zeitgeist moment, it just hit. And so we reached out to Kerry Washington and asked her to do the spot for us. She came back and she said, I'll do it, but I have an Oscar winning director that I want to do this. Like, oh, now that means my budget just went like triple. So we hired the director, but we asked, hey, Kerry, can we do a shadow shoot that we'll use on our digital channels, and we'll do this on the side? So on the day that the big Oscar-nominated director's production was going on for the commercial, I directed this piece that you saw and wrote it in a studio about 2 miles away from, or 2 blocks away from where the other spot was going on. I just wanted her to be emotional. So all we did, literally what happened there is what you're seeing. I sat on the other chair, or I had one of my co-workers sit on the other chair and just talk to her and just get her to tell her story, and that's what we filmed. At the end of the day, we put those commercials to the test to see which commercial will be used nationally. Which one won? Ours. You didn't need an Oscar-winning director. You needed someone that understood that I just need to connect and make that story be real and be authentic and pull that common thread of who she was, not anything else. And she drove action. She talked about hanging that purple purse charm. She talked about going to the website to order. It was a great opportunity for the Allstate Foundation to raise a lot of awareness, raise a lot of money for this cause, domestic violence, which was really meaningful. Finally, I encourage you to see things differently. Telling your brand story needs to be about being authentically you. However that may come to life in whatever medium that you need for it to come, but always focusing on who your audience is. There's so many diverse ways to tell a story. There's so many diverse people out there. Why keep doing the same thing over and over? Any of my teams that I've worked with, the number one rule that we have is don't ever tell me, why don't we do what we did last year? Number one way to get kicked off one of my teams is to try to reach out into the back. Doesn't mean that we don't honor the back or respect the, look back or respect the past. Just means that there's always something fresh that you can bring to the table. So why not try to bring something fresh? And as you've heard in our last session, you'll hear another session. It's the things that you bring into your life that inspire you, that continue to give you that fresh idea. My favorite role in my job is as an ideator. I often get pulled into a meeting and say, just give us ideas. And I will always give you an idea. I don't care what the subject is, what the brand is, what the topic, I don't care. My job is to be inspired and have ideas. So I try to live a carpe diem life so that I'm always inspired and I can always tell a story. Think differently. The things that are out there around you are the things that you want to bring into your life. Here's a brand that thought differently.
Republic, where happiness is eating the same breakfast. Circle is good, hexagon is bad. Happiness is eating the same breakfast. It's another perfect morning in the routine republic. Circle is good, hexagon is bad. Same, same, same. Good, good, because happiness is eating the same breakfast.
Hey, oh, let's go!
So as the commercial is ending, I'll tell you a little bit more about the spot. At the time, I got a chance to work with Taco Bell when they were introducing breakfast. It was the first time that they were coming out into the breakfast, and it was really the first time that anyone was really challenging Burger King and McDonald's. Breakfast defectors. It was the first time someone was challenging the big guys, and so we had to go different. And so they decided they were going to be bold, and they were going to take them head on. If you pay attention to that spot, they mocked a lot of the stuff that we've come to know about the other big guys, the clowns, Ronald McDonald. They had a moat that they ran across there and it was full of balls, like the little ball pit at the McDonald's. They really were jabbing McDonald's hard. So hard that McDonald's had to come up with a campaign to combat this because it became so popular. And actually, at the time of the launch, they ended up taking market share, which is success, from the big guys because people really gravitated to the idea of it's okay to be different. The contributions that I did, I led the digital and social parts of this, and then we introduced to Taco Bell a pivot in who they were. Up until this point, they were just a fast-moving consumer goods company. They were just a fast food chain, and they sold taco-inspired stuff. They don't call it Mexican. It's more like Tex-Mex inspired is what they say. And so what we introduced to them as a concept was, who do you want to be and who do you want to engage with? And they realized that who they really wanted to be a part of the lives of were youth. So they pivoted their whole strategy as a company to become a youth culture company. And they wanted to be the kind of company that just challenged and inspired and motivated and got behind youth. So it stopped being about selling tacos. It started being about us supporting the youth that are gonna eat a taco. And all of a sudden, all their sales went way, way up and continue to go up. They're having an amazing run over the last couple of years, continuing to embrace this. And we introduced the idea of really buying into the world of social influencers. This is about 4 years ago now. And this was where the beginning of the rise of the social influencers. And I think there's a session tomorrow morning on social influencers that you'll want to hear more about. But we embraced that right away, and we started hiring these influencers. And we did something, again, that was out of the norm for a brand. We weren't telling them what to say. All we did is we said, you're hired for our company, go talk. And anytime they wanted to do anything related to anything, we'd say, you want to come to the store? Well, we'll close the store for you. Do you want us to cater your meals? We'll cater your meals for you. Whatever it was. And naturally, these influencers just grabbed on, and they were giving us tenfold more value than what we were paying them because we gave them the freedom to just tell the story the way they wanted to. It's risky, scary, but it worked out really well because we knew who we were and we weren't afraid of, and since you saw the defectors, they weren't afraid to take on, they weren't afraid to mock themselves or mock others, so it made it really, really well. So with that, I will say Excelsior. That was the sign off to one of my favorite comic book heroes, Stan Lee, and Excelsior means onward and upward, so as storytellers, I wish you the same. Thank you. I guess I'm supposed to ask, any questions? Yes?
So I'm just curious, you talked about humor and the humor spectrum and the humor curve. So what did you find was the humor appropriate?
Yeah, so I wanted us to be more in the guffaws, like slapstick, stupid, because when you read all the commentary that was happening about Cricket Wireless at the time, oh my gosh, it felt like the script to a comedy. It just could not be that bad. But the company leadership obviously didn't want to poke that much fun at themselves. So we ended up more of a tongue-in-cheek kind of humor, which was almost midpoint. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I'll make another shameless plug if you guys want to hear a really interesting podcast about personal branding. You can listen to one with Hugo right there. He did a great job.
It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Very, very meaningful podcast, and I think those of you that are particularly interested in knowing who you are and knowing how you can be a brand yourself should listen to Hugo's podcast.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned in the blowtorch video that a part of it got memed, and I saw that Colin Kaepernick you put up there, and that got memed to oblivion. Do you consider that when you're putting a campaign or a story together, how people will react or meme it or make fun of it? People can make fun of it in a good way or a bad way. They like it or they love it. But is that something you consider when you're putting that together?
Absolutely. Absolutely. On some topics and some subjects, you care a lot more, and others you don't. At Taco Bell, when we went in there, we did an audit of all their digital spaces, and we realized that nothing that existed out in the world was put out by Taco Bell. People just created stuff. So our first thought was, well, that's bad. The second thought was, how do we put the stuff that we want, even if it's memeable? So we started flooding the waves with every channel, every digital, all Google, everywhere we could with stuff that we created. But what happened? When they were memeing us and making fun of us, now they were using high quality art with our real URLs, that now when they came to us, now we controlled the topic. We didn't want to be kept out of the conversation. We wanted to be able to control or at least guide it a little bit. So that's okay. On the Colin Kaepernick stuff and things like that, there's serious moments as well. So you want to be conscientious of that. And that's a moment where you step back and you have this discussion with your leadership, whoever's making the decisions. Where do we stand and how do we feel about this? And are we okay if it goes this direction or that direction? And then you're okay with it. And then that means you're going to see ugly stuff and you're going to be okay with it and walk away. You prepare your PR team for a crisis response, whatever you might need. You prepare your CEO to be ready for this. It just reminds me like of the Boeing situation that's going on right now. If I would have been on that team, the first thing I would have done is sat down with the CEO and said, you need to go out and say sorry right away, instead of yesterday or 2 days ago when he did. So you just are prepared. Sir.
The real two-part, going off the meme stuff, you do have some companies, I don't have a great example off the top of my head, but try to play into that and try to be relevant, and it just kind of comes off really bad when it comes to memes or gifs, or especially on their social media accounts.
I would say on that, just before your second part, you can't try too hard. Remember I said be authentic and know who you are? Be who you are. If you're not the guy that's always funny making memes, don't make the memes. But go support that influencer that does and celebrate them, or go comment and say great stuff, or tell them, hey, what if I send you free food, or what if I send you a new computer, or whatever. Be a part of the story. Don't just, try to force yourself into something that you're not.
Yeah, the other part was when you were talking about the Kerry Washington video and kind of how you did that yourself.
Yeah, don't tell the other director about that, okay? Shh, our secret.
I have a lot of, I'm freelance and have a lot of smaller clients, and I'm really trying to push them to let's do more video, even if it's on a smaller scale, the interview style, and stuff like that. And it's not really much of a question, but if you kind of talk a little bit more about maybe some of the importance of video, even if it's not an Oscar-winning director, it can be low budget, and it's still super effective.
Look, any brand right now that's not working at video at some level is not understanding how the world works. Video has to be a part of your strategy at some level. It doesn't have to be big budgets. Last week, I shot a full commercial for a client on my iPhone. And I did it just to demonstrate that you can. iPhones shoot at 4K, which is broadcast quality. I didn't need anything more expensive. What I needed was a good storyteller. So anyone can point a camera, but not everyone can tell a good story. So that's where you come in. Sell yourself. I'm the good storyteller. Who cares about the medium? And what was really satisfying about that commercial, when I showed up with my team, it was me and another guy that works with me. We both are on iPhones, and then we hired a grip to help us with some reflectors for lighting. The client was like, oh, I feel like I got bamboozled here. I was expecting this big production, whatever. And then we showed them the cut of the commercial, and they were so blown away. They called their whole staff, and they made us play it like 3 or 4 times over. I'm like, the proof is in the pudding, so I'm like, good. Now the budget next time is going to be higher. Yes, ma'am.
How did you get in contact with the blowtorch guy?
We troll social and digital deeply. And part of knowing your brand is knowing what's being said out there. So we have always, on the bigger brands particularly, assign someone and tell them every week. And on Cricket, we had one guy, to this day, he still gets called, Cricket Ryan. His job was just to be the guy that went out there and found stories. And all these fanboys and fangirls, we had this one kid, he was 16 years old, and he sent us this whole blueprint on how to upgrade the technology on the phone. We didn't know he was 16, but he sent all the stuff, and so we contacted him, and we're like, hey, what's going on? When we found that he was 16, we're like, well, thanks. How about if we send you a phone? And then he called us back, and he goes, I want more. So then I said, okay, we're going to hire him as an intern, and we brought him in for the summer, and he became an intern for us. What an amazing advocate. I did nothing. I just celebrated what this guy already wanted to do. Free publicity, yes, all day. So, yes, sir.
So, I've been interested to ask experts about this. So, I'm sure most of you saw Fire Festival.
Oh, yeah.
Netflix film, and what we realized was, number one, the power of social influencers.
Yeah.
Earlier. But two, I think what they were able to create, I just want to get your insight on this because it was so effective. I mean, they sold an experience that was fraudulent, right? So, could you walk me through a little bit of what you think was good there? What are some things that you think really resonated other than social influencers?
You know, I think the Fire Festival was amazing. The whole idea behind it. My team tried to buy sponsorships into that for several of our brands. I was working with several that you saw on the screen today. I won't mention any names so that they don't get caught into that. But everyone was really captivated by this because these influencers were really doing their job. So what worked is that they created momentum. What worked is that they created excitement. They created a thirst, a desire. What worked is that all these people that all of us scroll and stop for were on board. What didn't work was they weren't authentic. They weren't true to who they were. The idea of a festival on an island somewhere, awesome. I hope someone does that. It's awesome. I wish they would have, instead of being so hungry for that moment, for that money, for whatever it was that caused them to just forget reason and just try to make it faster, I wish he would have taken a year, because that would have been a really successful campaign he would have still been making money today. But his greed got in the way, and his greed got in the way because he wasn't authentic. He wasn't authentic because he didn't know who his true self was. He didn't understand his common thread. By the way, I want to go to the festival, but I could not afford that. That is rich. But there was a lot of great ideas. They had these bands that you can check in. I hope someone's developing that technology. So there was a lot of great stuff, but that's a whole other, let's do another session just on Fire Festival. That'll be fantastic. So last question, because I don't want to stop in the way of having a toast with you outside somewhere when we have our drinks. Any last questions? Thank you, folks. It's been a pleasure.